Welcome to the Real Estate Talk podcast with myself, Oliver Ingalls, and my esteemed co-host, sat next to me as always, Benji Weinberger. If you find anything useful from this podcast, if you learn anything, if you pick up any hints or tips or nuggets, we would love for you to like, subscribe, and share. Now, on today's podcast, this is part 2. We had a resounding messages, views from part 1 of this podcast saying that I've never learned more in 45 minutes than I've done in like my 5-year career was like a literal quote I received. So we thought we'll give back and carry on because this is what you guys want. It was a good one, the first one, Benj, wasn't it?
Well, this morning I had a 3-minute voice note from an agent up north asking a follow-up from the podcast. So
Love that.
Yeah, I think it was important to do a part 2. So here we are.
Love that. So we're gonna pick up basically where we left off last time, okay? And the next topic of discussion was around brokers opens / events, okay? Now, I think it's probably fairly common knowledge to say that if you rewind 2 to 3 years, did anyone do a brokers open 2 to 3 years ago in the UK? That is.
I mean, listen, we're the agency that is at the forefront of it, and we didn't do it. It was becoming something that we were doing. But now I think any property that we've got that's, let's say north of £5 million, part of my thought process of route to market is an open house before you go to the portals. Listen, obviously, if you're selling something at, 500, 600, 700,000 pounds, you might not have a broker's open because realistically people might not want to come. But for the, top end of the market, it's absolutely part of the process now of having an open house.
So tell everybody why it is essential now that we do it. And I completely agree with you.
So ultimately, our job as the mandated advisor is to sell the property as quickly as possible for the best price. Mm-hmm. It's just obvious. That's what our job is. And how you go about that, there's different routes. But ultimately, the more exposure you have, the more eyeballs you have on that property in a discreet manner, if that's the route you want to go down, is what's going to unlock the sale. So ultimately, you're giving more reach and you're tapping into the collaboration piece with the other agents who actually will have buyers naturally because they're operating in that sphere. And as you've touched on in previous podcasts and you say it quite regularly, is fine, they can come to us and we might have 20% market share, but that's great. But ultimately, what about the other 80%? And therefore, an open house is opening the door to the other 80%. Fine, we have to pay away a fee, but it's giving more eyeballs on our client's property, which gives us more chance of selling quicker for a better price.
100%. Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I think it's I've always believed.
You said that sentence, by the way, in part 1. I was listening
nailed
to
it.
You said you've hit the nail on the head or something, and you made a comment about it. You said it 4 times.
Honestly, yeah. There's a few words I normally say.
It's a great ego boost.
Epic.
I love it. I love it.
All the time. So.
Ego boost.
No, look, I think you really have hit the nail on the head. It is. It's imperative now that we open up the market, isn't it? We don't hold all of the buyers, and we'll never admit to our clients that opposite us that we hold all of the buyers. And especially over the £10 million threshold now, buyers will go to one agent, maybe 2, and they will then go out to the market to find all of the options in the market. And if we're not the 1 or 2 of the agents, then ultimately we have to be able to introduce the particulars and the property to that 1 or 2, which means that mass market. And I've always kind of believed that you can't sell something unless you've seen it. Okay. It's like if there was a new chocolate bar that's been created, I can't sell it because I don't know what it is. I haven't tasted it. How can I describe what it looks like or what it tastes like? And it's the same with a property in my eyes. Unless you've been there and you've seen it with your own hands and you've touched it and you can feel your way around the house, you can't then sell it on. But also that house then sticks in your mind. So then when you are talking to a buyer and suddenly they go, I'm looking for a house up to £10 million, you go, do you know what? I saw a house 3 weeks ago that Ollie and Benji are marketing around the corner. That could fit perfectly for you.
So I'm going to do something which we don't often do on our podcast. I disagree slightly.
Go on.
And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm literally having this conversation with a client of mine at the moment, because he's appointed me. And at DDRE, there's 30 agents. And a number of the agents, because everyone's running their own diaries and this client isn't their client, haven't come to see the house. And he's explaining that how can they sell the house if they haven't seen it?
Yeah.
So there's a house that I'm marketing discreetly in Highgate at just shy of £10 million. The 3 viewings that I've either had or I'm having tomorrow are with agents that couldn't make the open house.
Interesting.
But they just know how special the offering is, that they know, having looked at the photos and the floor plans. So I agree with you. I think it's a mixture of getting them through the door, but if they can't get through the door, it's our job to make sure that the agents are aware of it.
Agreed.
Because it might be difficult to match up diaries. And if you say, this is the open house, it's 2 hours and this is the day, they might be on annual leave or they might have appointments. And I think the key is at least distributing the content so they're aware of it. And any good agent can kind of judge from photos, floor plans, if it's going to be a good fit for said buyer.
Yeah, I think that's great. So let's get it back to a broker's open. So what do we do? What's the first steps that we do to having a broker's open?
Well, firstly, I mean, I always run it past the owner, because what I'm realizing is that it's an alien topic in the UK. It's very normal on a Saturday. You'll see in the US, for example, every weekend, brokers will have 2 or 3 open houses. It's the norm. It's what's expected. Here, it's not. So I'm often explaining to my clients what an open house is. So there's no, miscommunication, and they're like, why are 20 people coming to my house at once? So the first part is educating my client and showcasing to them what we do. And then once they understand that piece, for my open house, I've kind of got free range at the property, and I will ask them, to pop out or not to be there. I mean, you'd pick a day that is you'll expect the highest rate of attendance. So, for example, depending on where the property is, you might do it from 4 till 6 when it's on people's way home. If you're going for a morning vibe, you might do from like 8 until 10, 8 to 11 that they're going on the way to work, and it could be their first appointment. And that's really important. Picking, you might actually also think, no, I'm going to do it from 12 until 2. I'm going to provide nibbles, some bagels or whatever. And then agents will pop in during their lunch break and can have some food. It's not just a one size fits all. You've got to think about these finer details. So I guess it's finalizing that. And then once you've finalized, you've got the green light from the client and you know when it is, then again, it's about distributing the message to the market and to the right agents that have influence in that marketplace that you're having an open house. And again, it's where you kind of have to lean into your relationships, because you're asking for, assuming it takes 10 to 15 minutes for them to drive from their office to the property, then they're going to be there for 15, 20 minutes, and then they have to go back to their office. You're asking someone for 45 to an hour of their hours worth of their time. So you have to tap into the relationships that you have, that they actually turn up, because I've been to some brokers opens where I've turned up and there's no one else there. So you need to make sure that you tap into those relationships and get the most out of it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money.
100%.
Because, we're going to be paying for, the time that it takes to create the content that goes out to the invites. You're then going to have drinks. You might have a few canapes. It's not cheap. And it's also a big commitment of our time. But also at the end of it, you want to be able to showcase to your client that, hey, Joe, I had 15 agents came through and we've got a viewing booked next week. It's just another thing that they're like, I made the right decision to go with that broker.
100%. And I think it's also key now that we actually don't just look at that geographical area, do we? And we've spoken about this a lot in other podcasts where, people are more asset driven than they are geographical driven. And it's funny enough, I was speaking to a lady last night who's got a house in St. John's Wood. And I said to her, look, there's probably a high probability your buyer isn't actually looking at all or aren't looking in St. John's Wood at the moment. And your buyer's probably out there in Kensington or Holland Park or Marylebone, and they're looking in different areas at this moment in time. And I said, so what we now have to do is, with those agents who work in the market that we're dealing with, we have to incentivize other neighborhoods, agents and brokers to now also have the foresight to be able to come across to see the house and to offer it out to their buyers. And that's where I think some local agents fall short a little bit, because they're very used to just looking in their box, their geographical street to street postcode. And And so for me, certainly it's super key to, because like you said, the Highgate people who haven't seen it but are introducing it probably know the street really well. They probably know the style of houses of really well. So they've already got a good basis around it. But if you went down to St. John's Wood agent, would he know that house? Probably not. Okay. So actually it's almost more imperative to show the other agents who wouldn't have typically seen this type of home before. And this is where, like you said, you have to lean into your network, and you have to also be able to not inspire, but to drive people to that broker's open. Like you said before, having some drinks, having some nibbles. I mean, I do a lot of events, and kind of this topic was brokers open / events where, I'd host things in the evenings, and I've had artists and we've had DJs, we've had some really cool evening vibes. And they're not just brokers. Sometimes they're also maybe wealth managers, private offices, interior designers, because everyone is influenced.
So I was going to say, one level on top of that, which you're probably the best in the business at doing, is not just limiting it to estate agents.
Yeah.
Because, the house in Highgate, for example, I know a handful of people that live on the street.
Yeah.
And they are interested in what's going on in the market. So I invited them to the open house. And I know sometimes you do residents open, which is slightly different to the open house. But, there's also, I know the street backs onto Highgate School. I reached out to the bursar of Highgate School to let them know about the open house. I know that a lot of the people that live on that street have perhaps a background in finance or tech. And I know a lot of the wealth managers that help those people, and it's important for me to put it across their desk. So it's, thinking outside of the box, because ultimately it's also showcasing to people, an open house is also a marketing tool for us. And for DDRE Global. Obviously, the number one aim and the number one goal is to get the right people through the door to give exposure to the asset, but also it's to show people what we're doing.
Yeah.
Everything that we do is marketing of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that us as a business, we do. It's not just, right, what are the main agents? It's who else that might have influence in terms of architects, art galleries that are close by that might have access to the same clients or new clients that we want to tap into.
Yeah, mate, I think it's epic, and a real life recent case study for me is obviously Jess and I've got a house in Richmond, and we were like, how the hell are we going to get people from central London to Richmond? That 45-minute trip, it's hard enough, like you said, getting them down the road.
Yeah,
let alone a 45-minute in-car journey. And so we sat down and we kind of thought outside the box, and we said, why don't we get like a cool red London iconic Route Master bus, and we'll pick everybody up and we can have champagne on the bus and everyone is networking and talking to each other. And it's a kind of a fun thing to do to get down to the open house. And so we picked everyone up 3 or 4 weeks ago now in Kensington, took them to Richmond, and it was epic. Everybody was talking about it. All of the people who came were posting on their socials and digital platforms and tagging us. And funny enough, off the back end of that, there was a lady who reached out to me who introduced me to her friend who lives in North London as well. And I'm now going to see her on Friday morning. And again, that for me is just, do you know what? We are at the forefront of trying to think outside the box. And now we've started to see brokers opens happen more and more from different agents. We kind of sit there and go, how do we get to the next level? What have we got to do next? How do we make them even better?
So I'm still waiting for my invite to that open bus tour. I will say that.
Been lost in the post.
Lost in the post. Lost on the bus. So going back, in terms of the difference between corporate and brokerage, if you're a big corporate company and you have, let's say, an office where you've got 60, 70 listings, can you do an open house for 60 or 70 listings and have open top buses to all of your listings?
I mean, look, ultimately you can't. And there's a few different reasons for this. And these are the answers. 1, you don't have the time. 2, you don't have the budget. Not because you don't, the company might not have the budget, but the companies won't sign off on it. It probably cost Jess and I 8 to 10 grand, I would say, for that day.
Wow.
With the bus, with the food that we had on, we had DJ down there, we had the videographer. We're probably around the 8 grand mark. Okay. It's £4,000 each. That's what we've invested into it. If you imagine going to your boss, 5 years ago when you're at the corporate, and not just corporate, any agency like that, and saying, can I have 10 grand because I want to do a broker's open? I mean, Jesus, they're never going to say yes to it. They'll never. I mean, sometimes it was hard getting like £100 to go down and buy some flowers for a client, let alone spending £8,000. And that, unfortunately, is why I believe, the broker model in the future will ultimately win, because you can be more creative and you can be faster. We, had it all set up within 2 or 3 weeks. We're able to pay for it and action it straight away. And ultimately that created 60 odd professionals coming to the home. I think off the back end of it, we had 200 or 250,000 impressions on digital platforms because everyone was posting about it and it hit all their clients. We had two viewings off the back end of it. Okay. So now me and you can go and showcase this to the next client that might want this. Ultimately, the corporates or the bigger agencies where you're employed, you can't. It's not because you don't want to. You just can't.
So what do you say to people when they could, let's say there's someone in the corporate world and they're listening to this and they say, okay, that's great. Like, great. You invested 4K each, did you sell the property?
No, not at the moment. And look, it's, this happened, a month or so ago. This is a £20 million asset. We are in these games now. For the £20 million could take 12, 24 months to sell. It's a very rare asset enrichment. Okay, so it's going to take a certain type of buyer, but ultimately we're trying. It's part of our plan. It's part of our strategy. Okay, the people who he's had on marketing at home before have never done anything like this. Okay, so at least I can sit back and I've hit 250,000 people already, because everybody's compounding impressions was 250,000 people, which resulted in 2 buyers. And that will keep compounding. And there will be potentially another buyer at some point that comes via those networks. And that's for a £4,000 each investment by Jess and I. But ultimately, the final fee figure is huge for that. It's gonna be 20 times that investment, And ultimately, I think it will come down to one day in the near future, in the next 2 or 3 years, where a client goes, how much money are you investing into this? Because everyone's been so used to, we'll just take photos and floor plans. And okay, people will do a bit more videos now. You might get a video if you're lucky from some of these other agencies. But it's actually going to be like, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to invest in?
Yeah, I think, Evan, we'll move on from the topic of open houses and move to what we do after that. But I think, a lot of what we do, obviously the main aim is to get things sold. That's obvious. But I think it's also an element of showing to the client that we're there, we're thinking about them, we're thinking outside of the box. We appreciate the market is very shallow and very difficult at the moment, but that's not going to stop us from thinking creatively and, not perhaps just sitting, being reactive and hoping that something's going to come along. We're going to try and create a lot of interest. And I think, when I joined this business, they actually looked at the whole marketing campaign, and historically it's kind of been, you put the property on the portals, you wait 4 to 6 weeks. If it hasn't sold, you reduce the price and then you go again. But from a marketing point of view and kind of content, it's okay, well, what do you do after that 6-week period that is not a price amendment? Do you go and have another open house? Do you go and create more content? Do you go and post a piece of content on socials that you then have spikes at different points? So I think our job is just showing to the clients that we're thinking outside of the box and doing things extra. And I will never say to a client, we'll do an open house and I'm going to sell the property. That's just lying. 100%. But I will do more than someone else who is sitting in front of you trying to win your business.
Mate, wicked. Okay. So I'm just trying to read my writing on the next topic that I put here. Okay. Global coverage. Okay. So obviously we've spoken about brokers opens and events where we're, targeting domestic, or at least kind of domestic, but brokers and professionals in different sectors. Of course, the global market for us, certainly here in prime central London, is massive. Okay, how do you even start thinking about how to attack global marketing and global coverage for your clients?
Well, I think we touched on it in the last podcast, referencing ADVSR, which I think we're very fortunate that we're the only UK agent that's able to upload UK listings.
And just before you go on, just give everyone again a quick snippet. If there's people fresh that are listening, just give a quick 2-minute on what is ADVSR.
Fine. So this isn't a sponsored ad. And I'm going to try and not sound like a robot because I feel like I repeat exactly the same word for word. ADVSR is a piece of technology that Daniel and Elliot have built. And essentially, it's a distribution platform that allows agents to become global agents. They have access to 41,000 agents that sit on the platform, where we know their contact details, the agency they're at, and their name. And we can then, through this platform, distribute listings in London to the best agents, let's say in New York, Dubai, the Middle East. And therefore, on the back end, when we're sending our web links out, we don't send PDFs. We create a dashboard, and on the back end, you can see the data. You can see how it's performing. You can see which agents are performing better than others. You can see where in the world it gets clicked. So it's essentially a distribution tool that allows us as one-man bands to distribute our content globally. So historically, previous business I was at, we were based in 35 different countries. I can now send my listings to the agents in those offices in the various different countries they sit in. So I don't need offices around the world. I've got the best individuals around the world. And if they've got a buyer for my listing, there's a fee agreement through the platform. And it's just an unbelievable tool to distribute our content globally. Yeah,
it's amazing. And even when, you work at these bigger agencies that have global presence, they still, and the analogy you used earlier was, they still only talk to their brand in New York, but that might only be then still 15% market share. The good thing is on our platform, on ADVSR, you have every agency out there.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I don't know when this podcast will be aired, but a couple of days ago, the news was released in terms of Knight Frank and Douglas Elliman's partnership was finished. So that's an opportunity for the Douglas Elliman brokers to, go and build their own relationships with other people in London and not have to go through one formal channel. So, that in a way plays into the hands of the smaller agencies like us because they can pick and choose who they want to do business with. So now, we can go and distribute our content to all the DE agents. And they're not in a sticky situation because it's with DDRE rather than with Knight Frank, which ultimately is better for the client.
Wicked. Okay, so going back into the original, so the global coverage element. Okay, so you've got the listing, you've had the brokers open now, all the agents locally know about it, they're all incentivized, and then you start to plan, I suppose, target what countries, certain demographics across the globe are going to be a good fit for your listing.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you do next then?
There's no one size fits all, and it's property specific. So to give you the two examples and the ones that I can think of, the Highgate property, it's a very domestic market. The people who will be buying that property, and I actually hate saying who I think the buyer will be because so often I'm proven that I'm wrong about it. But I would imagine whoever buys that is going to be a family with kids at Highgate School. So it's going to be a domestic buyer. I had some penthouses over in St John's Wood overlooking Lord's Cricket Ground. Very different market. And if you actually look at the two buyers that bought into it, one was both were Asian families. So, with that, for example, I sat down and mapped, right, it's going to be probably a cricket fan. So what are the biggest countries that are cricket crazy fans? So we had Australia, we had South Africa, we had India, we had New Zealand, and that was the market that we were looking to try to tap into. So we, through the use of ADVSR, we can see the best agents in those specific countries and specific markets that I can then go and tap into. So if I put Australia, it will bring up a list of Australian agents that I can go and tap into. We're fortunate that I can actually go and speak to the guys at ADVSR and say, listen, this is the property. Do you know anyone specific? And ironically, one of the guys knew an agent in Australia that was a specialist in penthouses, and that was it. So we found an Australian penthouse specialist. It didn't result in anything, but I can at least sit down and map out who I want to get the property in front of.
Yeah.
Which I'm very fortunate that we have that. But it's very property specific. But as I said, when you think of a rough idea of geographically where you think the buyer might come to, we've realized it's very difficult to get to that high net worth individual direct, but it's very easy to get to the best brokers in those specific markets, get the content in front of them, and then they can distribute it out with their personalized branded web links to their customers.
Love that. Yeah, it's such a brilliant answer. And honestly, the tool we have at our disposal is just incredible, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Very fortunate
that we're able to speak to all of these guys. You know, we normally like send them a WhatsApp or communicate, give them a call, you know, and then they're able to distribute that link to everybody, you know. And again, they do it on their digital platforms. You know, we upload the videography, any reels that we do. And so they've not just got a link that they can send to one client or 10 clients. They can also post on their socials, you know, and hit tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people. Yeah. And then it's like that compounding value again, you know, that one person suddenly gets to people like that. And it's like a spider diagram. It's amazing. One thing that I've also done a lot recently is obviously I'm super work hard on my LinkedIn, and when the whole, for example, like American market at the moment, you know, I think 70% of the buyers over £10 million at the moment are American in the market. So I started to look at, again, wealth managers and private offices in America. And again, via LinkedIn, you can find all of these people. And I was reaching out to every single one of them, you know, saying, hi, this is what I do, blah, 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 got this amazing listing. And any engagement that I got off the back of that, I was then able to use ADVSR to get their own digital link, because on an EVSR, you don't just have to be an agent or a broker. So Matt Smith, who's in the private office in New York for a family, you know, with a family office, I can now give Matt his own direct link that he can then send to his client or anybody else as well. And so it's crazy.
So I think because obviously, you know, agents who will be watching this won't have access to ADVSR.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing that I would say, just on the point that you just messaged, because you've gone and thought outside of the box, which anyone else can do. You're fortunate enough that you've got ADVSR that makes it a seamless process of actually distributing the content. There's nothing stopping another agent in another business doing what you did on LinkedIn, finding those wealth managers or whoever that have ties with US buyers, and also sending the listings that they've got, perhaps in a more friction way, whether it's a PDF or a brochure that, you know, you can't be tracked, but you can still do that.
Of course.
You know, ADVSR is just there to support us. We've still got to go out of our way to find out and map out where we want to get this content distributed to.
Exactly.
So I think the key is, for me, is as an agent, you need to think outside the box and think, you know, not like a cookie cutter that you put it on the portals and that's it. Like, right, I can see a pattern here of buyers that are coming into London. This could fit this profile. I'm going to go on LinkedIn, type in, you know, CEOs in USA or whatever, and they can go and say, hey, here's the whatever company's link to the property. They can still do that.
100%.
But I fear that some people don't, or most don't.
Yeah, look, I think...
but maybe because it's so difficult, because they don't have the tech to support them.
Maybe, but I think none of this stuff that we do is brain science, is it? You know,
we're estate agents at the end of the day.
Exactly. We do. Yeah, we think about it in more in depth, and we target, and ultimately have to be more proactive with it. But anyone can do that. Anyone can go onto LinkedIn tomorrow and start just like typing those people and starting relationships.
Yeah,
it's the easiest thing to do. We now live in a digital era where you can literally talk to bloody anybody across the globe, or find someone on a digital platform and send them a message. We weren't able to do that 20 odd years ago. So if you can't do it now, you're never going to do it. But I think it comes down to laziness, and just being such set in their ways of finding a new listing, putting it online and hoping for the best. But the things that we're able to do on a weekly basis is sit down with our clients and demonstrate brokers opens, events, global network. This is what we're doing on LinkedIn. This is what we do. And then they can say, do you know what? I cannot, you know, you're on it.
So do you think it boils back down to, I know I touched on it before in terms of the corporate via the brokerage, because, you know, in a corporate model, you're paid a crappy salary. You're having to negotiate at the end of the year to perhaps get, you know, 10, 15% commission if you're lucky. Whereas if you're working in a brokerage and you get paid like we do, 70% of what you bring in, you're so heavily incentivized to go out and sell that property. And I think there was such an interesting stat that Elliot or someone shared into our WhatsApp group, that they looked at the data and it was something like, in the brokerage world, 73% of listings that the broker model takes on leads to exchange, versus 52% of properties that the corporate world take on lead to exchange. So if you go to a brokerage, because they perhaps take on less and they put more towards it, most of their properties end up exchanging contracts. Do you think that plays a role in that as well?
I mean, I definitely think so. Only because I know how much more I'm doing now than what I was able to do.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't able to do a lot of this stuff beforehand. And ultimately, you know, a big thing that I always say to my clients is, you know, at probably agencies that I've worked at beforehand, you might get on average 30 minutes a week of that team working on that listing, max, and some weeks nothing. Whereas now I would say you get 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours, you know, proactivity on that listing, because we take on maybe 10 to 15 clients at once. We're building teams now as well, you know, so ultimately we have more time, and I can do way more in 4 hours than I can do in 20 minutes. And that will ultimately lead to quicker results and higher offers. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. But on the flip side, you have to be a certain type of person, don't you, to do this job? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've spoken about it in other podcasts, right? The amount of different hats you have to, you know, now, and actually a hat that we haven't mentioned is you have to be an events planner.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
for the open houses,
yeah,
you know, we're fortunate we've got the support of Mariana, but, you know, you have to think about those sort of things, and it's 100%. Time consuming.
Yeah.
It's not just the 2 hours that you just turn up. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of hours I've been like sat at my house 9, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm sending out invites. You know, I'm talking Marriott. I'm picking up bottles of champagne the next morning from, you know, a distributor down the road. Or you've got all these things to not worry about, but you have to think about them. You know, what's going to make it cool? Then you've got the worry. You've got to worry, like, are people going to turn up? You know, and you've got DJs to sort. You've got X, Y, and Z. You've got ADVSR links to get. Like, it takes a hell of a lot of time, and you have to be that type of person who can multitask like that, but also put everything into it, because it's not easy. It's not easy, and you know, it's frustrating at times.
But that's the part that I would say I love it now.
Yeah.
The not easy part
is
and
the love, yeah.
The fuck ups and getting things wrong.
Yeah.
Because we're in a space that hasn't been created before in the UK.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the norm for open houses. So I love it when I call agents that are, let's say, aliens.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean you're having an open house? So are you calling from America, or are you calling from, like, they're quite facetious, but I love that.
Yeah.
Because we're working in a space that hasn't been played in before. We're the first people doing it, and I'm enjoying it.
Mate, I think we even said about it this morning. The journey's the fun part of this.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think we were probably one of the first people to have a podcast out, okay, dedicated to what we're doing and what we talk about every single week. And a lot of people know us for the podcast, okay?
Yeah.
The events that we hold, you know, no one's on a fucking bus tour down to a listing beforehand. Mate, I'm super proud of that. You know, that's something that I'll look back at and go, yeah, do you know what? We were the first people to kind of start pioneering that.
Yeah.
Digital things, AI, the AI new account and stuff that you've got, Benji AI, fucking cool. Like, you're pioneering it. No one else has done it out there before. And actually, it's part of the fun of the journey.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to use your phrase. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
You know, for me, so in the summer, I'm going to represent Great Britain in the Maccabee Games for football. And the talk is, we want to win gold. And I keep on trying to bring it back and be like, yes, that's what we want to do. But let's be so obsessed with turning up twice a week to the training, turning up on the Sunday for the friendly, making sure that we're eating well, sleeping well, gymming well, and being so obsessed with the process that then the result will happen. And, you know, teaching Tara in my team, now being a team leader, I'm saying to her, get so obsessed when you get a new listing with doing the right things that the result will then happen. But there's such an obsession with the result, and people are like, why can't I just do it? But you have to go through the motions. And, you know, I think the days of what historically has been photos, floor plans, whacking it on Rightmove. That's what has been the journey.
Yeah.
We're now creating a new way of additional things that become the journey to get to the result.
100%. Wow.
Part
3 is going to go on to, we've got 4 or 5 more topics to talk about. But we want to make sure that we don't just like skip on them and rush over them, because I think there's so many nuggets. So we will go into the next part 3. We hope again that you have enjoyed this podcast. We hope that you're learning. If there's anything more that you'd like to actually hear from Benji and I, would love to hear it in the comments. Maybe what's inspired you, what you've learned. If you have any pushback, like, we're not writing the right rules here. You know, everybody has their own different opinions. You can certainly rebuttal against us, and maybe that'd be quite cool to have one day. But we hope that you've loved this podcast, because we enjoy talking about it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and as Ollie said, we thrive when people engage with us and ask us questions. As I touched on at the very beginning of the podcast, someone sent me a 3-minute voice note this morning asking how to handle a certain situation, and I took so much pride in giving them the answer. And we're here as sounding boards. As Ollie said, we're not writing the rules. There's no right or wrong answer, but kind of tap into the fact that we want to help, and we'll always reply. So
if you've enjoyed this podcast, we would again love for you to like, subscribe, or share it to friends. And we will see you on the next one. See you soon.